Hey, what's going on, everybody? Tyler Adolfo here, not Jack Harlow's fat cousin. And here today in this video, going to be talking to you about my experience with hospitalization for mental illness. More specifically, I want to tell you about two different experiences I had, because that's how many times I've been hospitalized in my life in 25 years so far. Let's hope there's not any more. What I really want to go over is how these experiences differed. And I'll really be stressing that because one hospitalization experience worked for the better and acted as a catalyst to bring about some serious positive change into my life very quickly. Whereas the other hospitalization experience had the polar opposite effect, where it actually exacerbated many of the symptoms I was experiencing to begin with and only sent me on a path where I spiraled further out of control. Now, something to understand is that these were two very different time periods of my life, so I guess we'll start with the very first one. In 2017, I returned to high school after having been a dropout for 2 years, and I was experiencing a lot of anxiety at the time because I had been socially isolated practically for the past 2 years, having virtually no contact with anybody outside of close family. And now all of a sudden I'm thrust into this environment where I have a packed schedule full of AP and honors classes and am bumping into people that I knew from before and around all new people. And it was just overwhelming, and it was a very depressing time for me. And as a result of this anxiety and depression, which just kind of built up, it really overwhelmed me, and it built to a point where, like, this is the only thing that I could think of at night. Every night I would go to bed, and it's the only thing I would think of is the anxiety that I would face tomorrow. I would have negative self-talk saying that I'm going to be a failure. And of course, none of these things were true, but at that particular moment in time, that's, when you're in that environment of negativity and anxiety and depression, the three of these things culminate, and it can contribute to you having a very catastrophic opinion of where you catastrophize and make things seem worse than they actually are. But at the moment, it felt like my world was collapsing, like there was no help, there was nothing that could be done. And on September 14th, these feelings became so intense that I actually wanted to end my life. And I kind of, in hindsight, view this experience more as a cry for help than it ever was any attempt to end my life. Essentially what happened is I went to a park, an empty park, with a bunch of knives. I had them packed on me, stuffed in my pockets, and I was going to stab myself to death, is basically what the plan was. I had a lot of thought about God on my walk there and while I was there. And I called to 911 and told them to send an ambulance to pick up my body. Police officers came, and to my surprise, they were acting with full composure and nothing like you see on the news of, police officers engaging in brutality or escalating situations out of hand. They acted with complete professionalism in my particular case. And they had me disarm myself, and I did. And I walked to the ambulance, and they took me to the hospital. And at the hospital, the nurses and doctors were all very understanding as well. They had a psychiatric person come and evaluate me. And they ultimately determined that I wasn't a threat to myself, that I was just overwhelmed with anxiety and depression, and that maybe it's something that medication and therapy could help with. And they released me on the condition that I attend a partial hospitalization program. So this is my true first hospitalization, and it was only a partial hospitalization. It was a hospitalization program that consisted of 6-hour days of group therapy, and during that therapy you can speak with experts about your medication regimen, about your goals, your plans, your therapy plan. And they put me on a medication that helped me with anxiety and depression. And long story short, I graduated from the partial hospitalization programming. I graduated from the program, and was back in school upon completion of about 2 weeks of doing those therapy classes and getting medicated. I then started attending classes regularly, and things went well, and I had an extremely successful junior year of high school. I got fives on all my advanced placement exams, made honor roll every single quarter, and had success in extracurriculars. It was a successful outcome as a result of that partial hospitalization. I went in with anxiety, depression. They treated it, sent me back on my way, and I was in a good place. Fast forward to 2021. So that was 2017. Fast forward to 2021. I'm long graduated since high school. I have graduated in 2019, first in my family to do so. And it is now 2021, my fall semester of my junior year at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And I took on a lot. I took on a course load that was extremely heavy. I became super involved in my frat on campus, Kappa Sigma, to a point where it was a detriment to all other facets of my life. I became obsessed with being successful in Kappa Sigma and with achieving things there, but not achieving things elsewhere. It was overwhelming to a point where I ended up awake for 5 days at one point. And this was actually, we were coordinating a effort to bring awareness to sexual assault awareness on campus. And I put together a project, a work that ultimately got read by thousands of people. It received hundreds of likes on the fraternity page, and it even got posted in the New York Times, and they quoted me in the New York Times for that project. And if anyone was curious about that, I could put that in the comments, but that project had me awake for days. And going forward, that pattern of being awake for days continued to only get worse. It kind of culminated with feelings of invincibility, paranoia, and at this point I was in full-blown mania. But at this moment in time, I didn't know what these words were. I didn't know what it meant to be bipolar. I didn't know what manic meant. And I certainly didn't think that I was schizophrenic or that I was in psychosis. I didn't think any of these things. But I was. I was having hallucinations. I was having grand delusions about the way the world works and about the way my life operates, about my surroundings, about my family, about my friends, about my fraternity, about my classes, about everything, about the world, about the things you see on TV, about the things you don't see on TV. All of this was coming together in full-blown mania. Full-blown mania. And to make a long story shorter, it culminated with me experiencing suicidal ideation. And I was at the campus pond. And after a phone call with a friend contacted campus authorities, campus police. And campus police came and took me into an ambulance because of the things that I had said to that friend on the phone. And now to talk a little bit about what it was like, this hospitalization experience. It was at Cooley Dickinson Hospital. And from the beginning, I was super talkative. I was very paranoid. I remember I was talking about how I would be the Andrew Carnegie of this century and that people are out to get me because of it. And that I would be the Andrew Carnegie, however, I won't abuse my workers' rights. Things like that, very grandiosity things. And I was on the bottom floor of this hospital, and it was kind of sketchy, very dark rooms. They had these elevator-looking doors to enter the rooms, and you were put in these rooms. You didn't have access to your phone. You could ask for it, and they would give it to you. But it was monitored, and you were being watched at all times, which maybe isn't the most helpful thing for someone who's paranoid and schizophrenic, but Eventually, they moved me to the upstairs, right? I had a couple visitors while I was in the downstairs area from my fraternity who came and saw me. Despite the negative things that I had been saying on social media about my fraternity as a result of my symptoms, there were still many members who came and visited me in person to see how I was doing, to see if there's anything they could do to help. And, these are just college kids. Of course, there's only so much that they can do. They're not mental health experts. And they did their best, and it means a lot to me now. At the time, it didn't really mean too much because I was in such a state of despair and of not having judgment and really not having the capacity to discern what was real and what was false. So that's the condition I was in downstairs. And then they moved me upstairs. I was having a lot of these same symptoms. I was getting into arguments with staff members about them violating my human rights, and I was posting about that on social media, and I wasn't supposed to be posting while I was up there. But when they gave me my phone for my free hour of the day, that's all I did. I continued to destroy my life over social media, posting just about everything you could imagine. I posted. And what did they do? The hospital ended up releasing me, despite me having these worsening symptoms, despite it being very clear that my mania was still full-blown, despite it being quite obvious that I was not capable of grasping reality. They end up releasing me from the hospital with no medications, no plan for follow-up treatment, no expert to follow up with, anything of the sort. It was just me in mania thrown back into the world. And that's the condition that they threw me into. And what followed? My mania spiraled further out of control. I became worse and worse. And before you know it, I found myself arrested. I found myself expelled by my university. I found all my social media accounts to be completely banned off the internet. My Facebook, my Instagram, my Snapchat, my Twitter, banned. That's the position I found myself in. Now, no education. Now, no degree. I ended up getting expelled by my fraternity as well because I said some things about nationals on my Instagram story before I got banned. But these are all things that happened after I got released from the hospital after getting treatment for bipolar and mania. And yet, the symptoms only exacerbated and things only got worse. So as you can see, the two very different experiences. There was one experience where I went for anxiety and depression, was treated for it, was no longer suicidal, returned to school, and had a very successful school year. Then there's the other circumstance where I was overwhelmed in college, taking on a lot of projects. I was clearly in a state of mania, very paranoid, talking very fast, having flight of ideas, and I was hospitalized as a result, once again, for suicidal ideation. And this time, they released me, but without treating the bipolar and mania, without giving me medications for that. And they released me saying in the medical records that my symptoms appear to not be worse. So my symptoms were already super bad to begin with. But that's the story of my experience with hospitalization for mental illness. Hope you all stayed for the length of the video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comment section below. If you have any tips for future videos that I could do for bipolar disorder or mental health, please let me know. I'm happy to look at it and check it out. And feel free to share your stories as well if you have any. Happy to interact with anyone and everyone who comes here. Thank you for watching my channel. This is Tyler Adolfo, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.